Okay, so someone hands you the construction company tomorrow that builds the actual warehouses, the enormous fulfillment centers with the Smile logo on the side, the buildings where the robots move shelves and the workers pack the boxes that eventually reach your door. You're not selling anything to consumers at all. You're building the physical infrastructure the entire e-commerce empire runs on, for one of the biggest, most reliably paying construction clients on the planet. Sounds like the perfect contractor relationship, guaranteed volume, a client with essentially unlimited capital, and buildings that follow a repeatable design you can build faster with every project. The honest answer is that this can be a genuinely lucrative construction niche, and it can also be one of the thinnest margin, most schedule-punishing corners of the entire construction industry, because the client holds almost all the leverage in every single negotiation. The first thing to understand is what makes this different from ordinary commercial construction. Amazon fulfillment centers are enormous, often exceeding 1 million square feet, built to a highly standardized design that Amazon refines and reuses across hundreds of locations nationwide. This standardization is exactly why Amazon can move so fast and negotiate so hard. Because the building design is largely fixed, repeated project after project, Amazon's construction team knows almost exactly what a facility should cost down to a fine level of detail, which means a contractor bidding on this work has very little room to build in the kind of cushion a one-off custom project might allow. You are bidding against other experienced logistics builders who know this exact building type just as well as you do, on a client that has seen the true cost of 100 identical warehouses before yours, and negotiates accordingly. Let's talk about what it actually costs to compete for this work in the first place, because the barrier to entry here is different from almost anything else in this series. It's not primarily about upfront capital, since you're not buying land or holding inventory. It's about bonding capacity and balance sheet strength. Large-scale commercial general contractors need surety bonds, essentially a guarantee from an insurance company that the project will be completed if the contractor fails, and bonding companies will only extend that guarantee based on a contractor's demonstrated financial strength and completed project history. A contractor without an established track record building projects of this scale simply cannot get bonded for a project this large, regardless of how skilled their teams are. Which means the pool of companies even eligible to bid on this specific category of work is considerably smaller than the broader construction industry, and building up to that bonding capacity, through years of smaller successful projects, is itself a multi-year investment before a company can even compete for its first Amazon contract. Here's where the real cost pressure lies, and it's almost entirely about schedule, not materials. Amazon's expansion timeline has historically been aggressive. Driven by e-commerce demand that doesn't wait for construction to catch up, and contracts in this space typically carry extremely tight completion deadlines with real financial penalties for missing them. Liquidated damages clauses, meaning a specific dollar penalty charged per day the building isn't delivered on schedule, are standard in this category of contract. And because a fulfillment center delayed by even a few weeks can cost Amazon meaningful lost capacity during a critical shopping season, those penalties are calibrated to be genuinely painful rather than symbolic. A contractor who hits a supply chain delay, a labor shortage, or unexpected site conditions doesn't just absorb a schedule slip. They absorb a contractually specified financial penalty on top of it, which means the actual margin on one of these projects can evaporate entirely if construction doesn't proceed close to flawlessly. This creates intense pressure on labor and subcontractor management, because meeting these deadlines requires coordinating an enormous workforce: structural steel crews, electricians, concrete crews, specialized material handling installers, often across multiple shifts working around the clock to compress the schedule as tightly as possible. Skilled labor shortages in commercial construction have made staffing these projects increasingly difficult and expensive in recent years. And a general contractor who can't secure enough qualified subcontractors at the rates built into their original bid faces a brutal choice. Pay more to secure the labor and eat the margin hit, or risk the schedule and eat the liquidated damages instead. There's also a materials and equipment dimension to this business that has become considerably more volatile in recent years, adding another layer of risk on top of an already thin margin structure. Steel, concrete, and the specialized material handling equipment, the conveyor systems, sortation machinery, and automated storage infrastructure that goes inside these facilities have all seen significant price swings tied to broader supply chain disruptions and tariff policy changes. Because bids on these projects are typically locked in well before construction actually begins, sometimes many months in advance. A contractor who bid a project before a steel price spike can find their material costs rising well beyond what was budgeted, with essentially no ability to pass that increase on to Amazon after the contract is signed, unless the contract specifically included price escalation clauses covering that exact scenario, which not every contract does, and which contractors with less negotiating leverage often find themselves unable to secure. It's worth understanding how the relationship with Amazon itself actually evolves over the life of a contractor's involvement in this space, because it illustrates the anchor-tenant dynamic we've seen throughout this series in a construction-specific form. Early in Amazon's fulfillment center expansion, the company relied heavily on a broad roster of regional general contractors across the country. Since building this many facilities simultaneously required more construction capacity than any single national contractor could provide. As the design became more standardized and Amazon's own internal construction management team grew more sophisticated, the company gained increasing leverage to negotiate harder on price with each successive round of projects, having accumulated detailed cost data across hundreds of nearly identical buildings that most individual contractors could never match. This has pushed margins in this specific niche progressively thinner over time for contractors without some form of genuine differentiation. Whether that's demonstrated superior schedule performance, specialized expertise in the automated systems installation that goes inside modern fulfillment centers, or simply a regional presence that reduces mobilization costs relative to competitors traveling in from further away. Staffing presents its own version of the challenge we've seen across other technically demanding industries in this series. Though here it's less about specialized technical expertise and more about sheer available labor capacity at the right moment. A large fulfillment center project requires coordinating potentially thousands of skilled tradespeople across multiple trades simultaneously, and in regions experiencing broader construction booms. Whether from other warehouse development, residential construction, or infrastructure projects competing for the same finite pool of electricians, concrete workers, and steel erectors. A contractor can find themselves genuinely unable to staff a project at the rates built into their original bid, regardless of how much money they're willing to spend, because the physical labor simply isn't available in that market at that moment. This labor availability risk is one of the most difficult variables for a contractor to price accurately at the bidding stage, because it depends heavily on the overall state of the regional construction market at the time the project actually breaks ground, which can be a year or more after the bid was originally submitted and the contract price locked in. Several regional general contractors who won early Amazon fulfillment center contracts during the company's period of most aggressive nationwide expansion described the same underlying tension. Winning the contract felt like landing a career-defining client relationship, guaranteed scale, a prestigious reference project, and the promise of repeat business as Amazon kept building. But the combination of thin bid margins, aggressive schedules, and liquidated damages exposure meant that a single serious weather delay, material shortage, or labor disruption could turn a project that looked profitable at signing into one that lost money by completion, even when the building was ultimately delivered successfully. Some contractors who performed well on early projects did secure the repeat business the model promises, building genuine expertise and efficiency gains as they refined their own processes across successive identical buildings. Others found that after Amazon shifted its expansion pace or reallocated projects to other regional builders, the specialized workforce and equipment they built up specifically for this narrow building type had far less value outside that specific relationship than they'd assumed when they first invested in it. So does owning a company that builds Amazon warehouses actually work as a business? The answer depends on a small number of variables. You need the bonding capacity and balance sheet strength to even compete for this work in the first place, built up over years before the opportunity exists. You need genuinely disciplined schedule management, because the margin in this business is earned or lost entirely in whether the project finishes on time, not in the underlying bid price. And you need enough diversification across other construction clients that a shift in Amazon's expansion pace or a decision to reallocate future projects elsewhere doesn't leave your specialized workforce and equipment without enough other work to stay utilized. The buildings were never really the business. The steel, the concrete, the repeatable design, none of that is what determines whether this company survives. What determines survival is whether you can deliver an enormous, complex structure on a schedule you didn't set. For a client who calibrated the penalty clauses specifically to make sure you deliver anyway, and that discipline, more than any construction skill, is the entire economics of this business in one sentence. That discipline, in practice, looks less like construction expertise and more like risk management. The same skill that separates durable operators from failed ones across almost every capital-heavy business covered in this series. The contractors who have built lasting, profitable relationships in this space are rarely the ones who won the lowest bid. They are the ones who understood exactly how much schedule risk, material price risk, and labor availability risk they were actually accepting when they signed the contract. And priced accordingly, even when that meant losing a bid to a competitor willing to accept thinner margins and greater exposure. In a business built around a single dominant client with enormous negotiating leverage and a repeatable building design that leaves almost no room for pricing surprises, the discipline to walk away from a bad deal is worth more than the ability to win the next one.